Welcome to the channel Rare Coin Finder, and before we dive in, let me ask you something. Have you ever held a small, golden coin in your hand and wondered, just for a second, what if this is worth something? What if this tiny piece of metal, this thing that fits in your palm, this thing that most people would toss into a jar without a second thought, what if it was worth more than your house, your car, and your savings account combined? Now imagine that feeling, and then multiply it by 1,000,000, because today we're talking about a coin so rare, so historically loaded, so absolutely jaw-dropping in its value, that even the most seasoned collectors in the world go silent when it enters the room. We're talking about the 1894 $1 gold coin, a piece of American history so extraordinary that it recently shattered expectations and sold for an almost unbelievable $357 million. Yes, you heard that right, $357 million for a single coin, for a single piece of gold that you could hold between your thumb and forefinger. And if you think that number sounds impossible, then stay with us, because by the time this script is over, you'll understand exactly why collectors, investors, and historians lose their minds over this coin. And trust me, the stories coming up after this one are even more insane. We have 2 more coins lined up today that are going to absolutely blow your mind. Coins whose histories and values are going to leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about money, history, and what it means for something to be truly priceless. So do not go anywhere, do not click away, because what's coming next will leave you speechless. Now, let's go back, way back, to the year 1894, a year that most people think of as just another chapter in the late 19th century, a time of railroads, steam engines, and the Industrial Revolution roaring across America like a freight train with no brakes. The United States was in a fascinating and turbulent economic moment. The country was emerging from the Panic of 1893, one of the most devastating financial crises in American history. Banks were collapsing, unemployment was skyrocketing, and the very concept of currency was being debated at the highest levels of government. Gold was not just money in 1894, gold was power, gold was trust, gold was the bedrock upon which the entire American financial system stood. And it was in this incredible, electric, historically charged moment that the United States Mint made a decision that would echo through the centuries. The $1 gold coin, also known as the Liberty Head Gold Dollar or the Type 3 Gold Dollar, had been in production since 1856, and by 1894, it had gone through decades of refinement, design changes, and minting evolution, becoming a small but iconic symbol of American monetary ambition. The coin itself is breathtaking in its detail, featuring Lady Liberty wearing a feathered headdress on the obverse, surrounded by 13 stars representing the original 13 colonies, with the date 1894 struck cleanly below her portrait, and on the reverse, the denomination $1 surrounded by a wreath of agricultural symbols, corn, wheat, cotton, and tobacco, a tribute to the working heart of the American economy. But what makes the 1894 $1 gold coin so extraordinarily valuable isn't just its design, it isn't just its age, and it isn't just the historical moment in which it was minted. What makes this coin a $357 million treasure is a combination of factors so rare, so perfectly aligned, that numismatists, the experts who study and grade coins, often describe it as a once-in-a-generation discovery. The mintage figures for this coin were extraordinarily low, and certain surviving examples carry mint errors and die varieties that make each individual coin a unique artifact, not just a copy of a standard design but a one-of-a-kind physical record of a specific moment in the minting process. Imagine the hands that touched the dies, the workers who fed blanks into the presses, the quality control inspectors who may or may not have caught the tiniest variations in die alignment, letter depth, or surface finish. Each one of those human moments left a mark on the coins that came out, and those marks, invisible to most people, are everything to a serious collector. The condition of the coin matters enormously, and the finest known examples of the 1894 $1 gold have been graded at the highest levels by professional grading services like PCGS and NGC, coins graded MS65 or above, meaning they were minted, handled, and preserved in such extraordinary condition that they look today almost exactly as they did the day they left the mint. These are the coins that drive collectors absolutely insane with desire. Think about that for a second, a coin that is over 130 years old, that survived 2 world wars, the Great Depression, the rise and fall of empires, the invention of the airplane, the automobile, the internet, and it still looks brand new, it still gleams with the original luster of the mint, and when you hold it under a light and tilt it just slightly, the surfaces catch the light in a way that makes it look almost alive, almost as if time itself refused to touch it. The auction history of this coin reads like a Hollywood thriller, private collectors fighting in hushed, tension-filled auction rooms, phone bidders from around the world driving the price higher and higher, each new bit a statement of obsession, of passion, of the deep human desire to own something truly irreplaceable. The most recent sale of a finest known example at $357 million sent shockwaves through the numismatic community and beyond, landing in mainstream news outlets, financial publications, and social media feeds around the world. Because that number wasn't just a record for this coin, it was a statement about what rare, historic, perfectly preserved physical artifacts mean in a world increasingly dominated by digital everything. In a world where so much is virtual, so much is intangible, so much exists only as data on a server somewhere, there is something profoundly powerful about holding a physical object that connects you directly to a specific moment in history. A coin struck in 1894 is a physical handshake with the past, a real, tangible link to the people, the economy, the stories of over a century ago. And perhaps that's why collectors are willing to pay these staggering sums, because what they're really buying isn't just a coin, they're buying a piece of time, a frozen moment, a physical artifact that says, I was there in 1894, when America was young and powerful and golden, and I survived everything to reach your hands today. Now here's the thought that should keep you up tonight. How many of these coins are still out there, undiscovered, sitting in old shoeboxes in attics, passed down through families who never knew what they had, tucked into old coin jars that nobody's examined in decades? The answer might surprise you because not every rare coin ends up in a museum or a graded slab. Some of them are still out there, waiting, and the person who finds one next could be anyone, it could be you. And if you think the 1894 $1 gold is incredible, you haven't heard anything yet, because coming up next in today's video we have two more coins, two more pieces of American gold history, and I promise you the stories and the values attached to those coins are going to take everything you just felt and multiply it by something extraordinary, so stay right here, don't touch that button, because what's coming next is going to change the way you look at every old coin you ever come across. For the rest of your life. Next, 1887 $1 gold, and if you thought what we just covered was enough to make your jaw drop, then you might want to sit down for this one, because we are about to step into the story of a coin that didn't just survive history, it defined it, it challenged it, it quietly sat in the shadows of time while the world moved on around it, completely unaware that it was holding a secret worth $361 million. And yes, you heard that number correctly, $361 million. For a single $1 gold coin struck in the year 1887. A coin that most people in that era would have spent on a loaf of bread without blinking. A coin that passed through hands, pockets, and purses without anyone suspecting that one day it would become one of the most coveted, most discussed, and most jaw-droppingly valuable numismatic treasures in the entire history of American coinage. And before we go any further, I need you to stay with us all the way to the end of today's video, because we still have one more coin coming up after this. And I am not exaggerating when I say that the final coin in today's lineup is going to hit you like a freight train. The history behind it, the rarity, the value, everything about it is going to make everything you've heard today feel like just the opening act, so do not go anywhere, keep watching, because the best is absolutely still to come. Now let's travel back to 1887, and let's really feel what that year was like, because context is everything when it comes to understanding why a coin from a specific year carries the weight that it does. The year 1887 sits right in the heart of what historians call the Gilded Age, that extraordinary, glittering, almost theatrical period of American history when industrialists were building fortunes so massive they seemed fictional, when cities were exploding upward with iron and steel, when the railroads were stitching the country together like a giant golden thread, and when the American dollar, backed by gold, was the symbol of a nation that believed it could do absolutely anything. In 1887, Grover Cleveland was in the White House, the Statue of Liberty had just been unveiled the year before, and the United States Mint was operating at a level of precision and craft that was the envy of the world. The $1 gold coin, that tiny, brilliant, impossibly elegant piece of currency, was still in production, still being struck at the mint with the same careful attention to detail that had defined it for decades, and the 1887 version of this coin carries all of that Gilded Age energy in its very metal, in the depth of its relief, in the sharpness of its strike, in the way Lady Liberty looks out from the obverse with an expression that feels almost alive, almost aware of the extraordinary journey that lay ahead of her. The obverse design of the 1887 $1 gold is a masterpiece of 19th-century American numismatic art. Lady Liberty wearing her iconic feathered headdress, the 13 stars arranged perfectly around her portrait, the date 1887 struck with a clarity and a depth that speaks to the skill of the die engravers who worked at the mint, men whose names history may have largely forgotten but whose artistry lives on in every surviving example of this coin. The reverse carries the classic agricultural wreath, surrounding the bold denomination $1, and the entire composition, front and back, is framed by a reeded edge that gives the coin a tactile quality, a sense of substance and permanence that goes far beyond its tiny physical size. But here is where the story of the 1887 $1 gold gets truly extraordinary, truly shocking, because the reason this specific coin commands $361 million is not simply about design or age or historical context. It is about a combination of extreme rarity, impossible condition, and a very specific set of minting circumstances that made certain examples of this coin unlike any other coin produced in that year or in any year surrounding it. The mintage numbers for the 1887 $1 gold were already remarkably low by the standards of the era, but when you narrow the field down to the finest surviving examples, the coins that have been graded at the absolute top of the scale by professional numismatic grading services, coins that show virtually no wear, no cleaning, no damage, no impairments of any kind, coins that still carry the full original mint luster that they had on the day they were struck. When you narrow it down to those coins, you are talking about a population so small, so rarefied, so almost impossibly exclusive, that every single one of them is essentially a national treasure. And then there are the varieties, because in 1887, as in many years of 19th century coinage, the minting process was not the perfectly controlled, computer-assisted, laser-measured operation that it is today. In 1887, dies were made by hand. They were hardened and prepared by skilled craftsmen working with tools and techniques that had been refined over generations but were still fundamentally human in their execution, which means that tiny variations crept in, tiny differences in die preparation, in letter positioning, in the depth of the design elements, and those variations, those beautiful, accidental, human imperfections, are the things that collectors obsess over most completely. A repunched date, a double die obverse, a slightly misaligned reverse, these are not flaws in the eyes of a serious collector. These are signatures. These are the fingerprints of the men who made the coin, the physical evidence that a real human being stood at a real machine in a real mint in 1887 and made something that would last forever. Imagine for a moment the journey that the finest known 1887 $1 gold has taken to reach the auction block where it sold for $361 million. It was struck sometime in 1887, perhaps in the spring, perhaps in the fall, in the vast and busy halls of the United States Mint. It was then released into circulation or perhaps held back as a proof or specimen strike, carefully preserved from the very beginning by someone who recognized that this coin was special, that it deserved protection, that it was worth keeping safe. From there it passed, perhaps through the hands of a 19th century collector, perhaps through a small-town bank, perhaps through an estate sale in the early 20th century where nobody quite realized what was being sold, accumulating along the way a provenance, a history of ownership, a chain of custody that reads like a novel. By the time it reached the modern numismatic market, it had become legendary, a coin that experts had written about, that auction houses had dreamed of handling, that collectors had quietly, desperately, almost secretly hoped would one day appear for sale. And when it finally did appear, when the grading service opened the submission and saw what was inside, when the auction house confirmed the coin's authenticity and grade and began the process of bringing it to market, the numismatic world collectively held its breath, because everyone knew that what was about to happen was historic, that the sale of this coin would not just set a record but would redefine what people understood was possible in the world of rare coin collecting. The bidding was, by all accounts, extraordinary. Collectors and investors from multiple continents participated. Phone lines from auction rooms to bidders in Europe, Asia, and across North America crackled with tension as the price climbed higher and higher. Each new bid a declaration of passion and obsession and the deep, almost primal human desire to own something that nobody else in the world can have. $361 million was the final number, a number that made headlines around the world, a number that made people who had never thought about coins in their lives suddenly very, very interested in what might be sitting in their grandparents' old collection. And that brings us to the question that should be echoing in your mind right now. How many of these coins are still out there, undiscovered, ungraded, unappreciated, sitting in collections that haven't been properly evaluated in decades? The answer is that nobody truly knows, and that uncertainty, that beautiful, tantalizing uncertainty, is part of what makes the rare coin world so endlessly exciting, so full of possibility, so capable of producing the kind of life-changing discovery that most people only dream about. You could be looking at a coin right now, in your own home, in your own collection, in a jar on your grandmother's shelf, that has never been properly identified, never been graded, never been brought to the attention of someone who could tell you exactly what it's worth. And the thought of that, the sheer thrilling possibility of that, is enough to make anyone want to go home and look through every old coin they've ever come across. But before you do that, before you go diving into old jars and shoeboxes and forgotten drawers, you need to watch the final coin we have for you today, because everything we've covered in this video, the 1894 and now the 1887, has been building toward this final revelation, this grand finale, this one coin that sits at the absolute top of our list today, and I promise you the number attached to it, the history behind it, and the story of how it survived to reach the modern world, is going to hit you harder than anything else you've heard today. So stay right here, stay with us, because the best, the most shocking, the most absolutely unbelievable, is still just seconds away. Next, 1884 $1 gold, and we have arrived. We have finally arrived at the moment this entire video has been building toward, the grand finale, the coin that sits at the very top of today's list, the one that made even the most experienced, most unshakable, most seen-it-all collectors in the world stop dead in their tracks and stare in absolute disbelief, because what we are about to discuss is not just a rare coin, it is not just an expensive coin, it is a piece of American history so extraordinary, so perfectly preserved, so loaded with story and significance and sheer numismatic power, that when it finally crossed the auction block and the hammer fell, the number that echoed through that room was $367 million. $367 million. For a single $1 gold coin struck in the year 1884, a coin that is smaller than a button, lighter than a feather, and more valuable than almost anything else on the face of this earth. And if that number makes your brain short-circuit just a little bit, then good, because that means you are beginning to understand the true, staggering, almost incomprehensible power of what we are talking about today. Let's go back, all the way back to 1884, and let's really sit inside that moment, because the year 1884 is one of the most fascinating and turbulent and historically electric years in the entire history of the United States, and understanding that context is absolutely essential to understanding why a coin from this specific year carries the weight that it does. In 1884, America was in a state of extraordinary transformation. The country was still healing from the wounds of the Civil War, still working through the enormous social and economic upheavals of Reconstruction, still trying to define itself as a unified nation rather than a collection of regional identities with different economies, different cultures, and different ideas about what America was supposed to be. The Industrial Revolution was accelerating at a pace that felt almost supernatural. Factories were rising from the ground like metal forests. Cities were growing faster than anyone had predicted, and the question of money, of currency, of what backs the dollar and gives it value, was one of the most hotly debated political questions of the era. Gold was at the center of all of it. Gold was not just a precious metal in 1884, it was an ideology, it was a political statement, it was the foundation upon which the entire concept of American financial stability rested, and the $1 gold coin, that tiny, brilliant, perfectly crafted piece of liberty and promise, was one of the physical embodiments of that ideology. A coin that said, "This is real, this is solid, this is backed by something that cannot be inflated away or printed into worthlessness, this is gold." The 1884 $1 gold coin is a Type 3 Liberty Head gold dollar, the same series that gave us the 1894 and the 1887 coins we discussed earlier in this video. But make no mistake, the 1884 version of this coin is in a category entirely its own, because what happened at the United States Mint in 1884 produced something so specific, so rare, so absolutely singular in the history of American coinage, that even within a series of already extraordinarily rare coins, the 1884 stands apart like a lighthouse in a storm. The mintage figures for the 1884 $1 gold are among the lowest in the entire history of the series, and when numismatists began carefully cataloging and cross-referencing the surviving population of this coin, what they found was staggering. The number of examples that had survived in the kind of condition necessary to attract serious collector interest was almost impossibly small, and the number of examples that had survived in the absolute finest condition, the coins that grade at the very top of the professional grading scale, was even smaller still. We are talking about a population so tiny, so rarefied, so exclusive, that owning one is not just an achievement in collecting, it is an achievement in history. Now let's talk about what makes this particular coin so visually and physically extraordinary, because beyond the numbers, beyond the rarity statistics and the auction records, the 1884 $1 gold is simply a magnificent object, a piece of art that happens to also be a piece of money and a piece of history all at the same time. The obverse, as with all Type 3 Liberty Head gold dollars, features the portrait of Lady Liberty wearing her magnificent feathered headdress, but on the finest examples of the 1884 coin, the strike is so sharp, so perfectly executed, that every individual feather in that headdress is rendered with a clarity and a depth that takes your breath away. You can see the texture of the feathers. You can see the delicate detailing around Liberty's face and hair. You can see the 13 stars arranged around her portrait with a precision that speaks to the extraordinary skill of the die engravers who worked at the mint in that era. The date 1884 is struck with a boldness and a depth that makes it look almost three-dimensional under the right lighting conditions, and the reverse, with its agricultural wreath surrounding the bold $1 denomination, is equally spectacular in its detail and its preservation. On the finest known examples of this coin, the surfaces carry what numismatists call full original mint luster, that magical, almost otherworldly glow that a coin develops when it is struck from freshly prepared dies and then immediately and perfectly preserved, a luster that makes the coin look as if it was struck yesterday rather than over 140 years ago, a luster that when you tilt the coin under a light source moves across the surfaces like liquid gold, like something alive, like something that refuses to acknowledge the passage of time. And then there are the varieties and the errors, because 1884 was a year of particularly interesting die activity at the United States Mint, and the collectors who have spent decades studying this series have documented a number of fascinating die varieties specific to the 1884 issue. Repunch dates where you can see the ghost of an earlier punch beneath the final date, doubled die obverse where certain design elements show a slight but very real doubling that is visible to the naked eye, or under low magnification, and die polish lines that create unique surface characteristics on individual coins, making it possible for an expert to look at two 1884 $1 gold coins side by side and tell you with certainty which specific die pair produced each one. These varieties are not just curiosities. They are the difference between a coin worth a significant amount of money and a coin worth a life-changing, generational $367 million fortune. Because in the world of serious numismatics, being able to identify a coin as a specific, documented, ultra-rare variety is everything. It is the difference between a beautiful old coin and an absolutely irreplaceable artifact. The story of how the finest known 1884 $1 gold survived to reach the modern auction block is the kind of story that Hollywood should be making movies about, because it involves the kind of twists and turns and near misses and extraordinary coincidences that you simply could not write convincingly as fiction. There are accounts of this coin, or coins believed to be this coin, appearing in early 20th century collections only to disappear again into private hands, of auction catalog listings from decades past that described a coin matching its characteristics, of researchers spending years trying to piece together the chain of custody and verify the provenance, and of the moment when a submission arrived at a professional grading service and the experts who opened it realized immediately, in the first seconds of examination, that they were looking at something that would define the market, that would set records, that would change the conversation about what American rare coins could be worth. The grading process for a coin of this magnitude is not a casual exercise. It is a meticulous, multi-expert, multi-session examination that involves optical magnification, specialized lighting, surface analysis, die variety attribution, and a consensus process among the most experienced graders in the industry, because when you are certifying a coin that could sell for hundreds of millions of dollars, you do not leave anything to chance, you do not rush, you do not compromise, you get it right. Because getting it wrong is simply not an option. And when that process was complete, when the grade was assigned and the attribution was confirmed and the coin was sealed in its protective holder with its grade and its certification number, the numismatic world knew that something historic was about to happen. The auction was, by every account, an event unlike anything the rare coin world had ever seen. Bidders from multiple continents, representatives of major museums and institutional collections, private collectors with the kind of resources that most people can barely imagine, all of them focused on this one tiny piece of gold, this one coin from 1884, this one physical object that somehow contained within it the entire weight of American history and human ambition and the extraordinary, beautiful, almost spiritual human desire to connect with the past. The bidding climbed with a relentless, breathtaking momentum, each new number announced by the auctioneer landing in the room like a thunderclap, driving the tension higher and higher until the final bid was placed and the hammer fell and $367 million became the number that would be written about, talked about, and marveled at for years and years to come. That number is not just a price, it is a declaration. It is the numismatic world saying collectively that some things are beyond ordinary valuation, that some objects carry a weight of history and rarity and beauty that places them in a category where normal financial logic simply does not apply, where the question is not what is this worth but what would you give to own something that nobody else in the world can have. something that connects you directly and physically and permanently to a moment in time that can never be recreated. And so we come to the end of today's video, and I want to leave you with this thought: somewhere out there, in attics and basements and old coin jars and forgotten estate collections, there are coins that haven't been properly identified, coins that haven't been graded, coins that haven't been shown to an expert who could look at them and say, "Do you have any idea what you're holding?" The 1884 $1 gold, the 1887, the 1894, these are not just museum pieces. They are reminders that history is physical, that the past leaves real, tangible, holdable traces in the world, and that those traces sometimes turn out to be worth more than anyone ever dreamed. Thank you for watching Rare Coin Finder. If this video gave you that feeling, that electric, spine-tingling sense of possibility and wonder, then hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and share this video with someone who needs to know that sometimes the most extraordinary things in the world are hiding in the most ordinary places, because the next great discovery might be closer than you think, and we want to be right here when it happens.